All right, so let's get this going. Andy, if we can start, please, I'd love you to kind of introduce yourself to the audience, find out a little bit about your journey in design to where you are now. Would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Hey, I'm Andy. No, super excited for TDA to have me today. So I'm the Chief Design Officer at Constant Contact. So we are a company that does marketing solutions for small businesses, nonprofits, leveraging AI, really trying to help these companies focus on what they do best, which is run their business and not worry about marketing. I've been in the design industry for many years. Before this, like you had mentioned, I led a large design organization at rocket companies, um, worked on the SunTrust side of the Truist merger, and led a design team there that focused on our COVID response for the entire bank. Before that, worked in power sports, worked in healthcare at 3M. I teach online at Kent State in their master's program, co-host of a podcast called Surfacing, and love to share some knowledge and do events like this that give back to the design community. So really happy to be here. Further back, I mean, who knows? We're going to talk about the future, not the past. So let's keep rocking and rolling.
Cool. Thanks for that. And with your varied background, it's not one of the questions I actually wrote down for you anyway, but with your varied background, I'm guessing you feel that the kind of design discipline is very agnostic across markets.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, for
Okay.
sure. I think that the thing about design or designers are we're really thirsty to learn things and to understand how people tick, how products work, how we can solve problems for people at scale. And I think it really is refreshing and challenging to be able to look at problems in different industries and take some of what you learn into those other industries. So it's really, we talk about diversity in many ways, right? We talk about diversity in background, diversity of thought. I also believe that diversity in perspective and experience is really important. So now that I'm working, in marketing, email marketing, what did I learn in healthcare or power sports or finance that we can apply that lens and look at something slightly differently to add value? So I think it's really important for designers or design leaders to really embrace what they've experienced in the past and try to take those learnings and see if you can apply them or see if you can look at something just a little bit differently when you come to a new organization.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. And look, this is quite a wide scoping question, but during your varied and very great career to date, what are some of the kind of big takeaways? What are the highs and lows, warts and all, and what's kind of helped you to be the design leader you are today?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So for me personally, I learn from observing. I actually learn from seeing people make mistakes. Sometimes watching how somebody handles something or having something handled with me improperly helps me realize, hey, wait, if I ever have to go through that situation, if I ever have to have that conversation with someone, if I ever have to let somebody go, like I'm not going to do it that way. How do I start to change that empathy and develop empathy from seeing poor experiences? Um, but if I think through my career, there's a couple of things that really stand out. So one of one of my first jobs out of school, I was working for the tabloids. So here in the U.S., it's like Sun, Star, Inquirer. You have the Inquirer in the U.K. We were doing some of that. You also have Mirror and some of those. But I was responsible for the final output of a lot of those. And we had an anthrax attack. Someone had actually mailed anthrax into our building, and our photo editor opened it, and he died of inhalation anthrax from that. And I remember like everything that was going on. It was that my dad called me. It was on the news. He's like, "Hey, you've got to go down to the health department. Your company's on the news." And we didn't know anything. Showed up, and they said, "Hey, we found anthrax in this building. We're going to treat you. We're going to sit you down, explain some things to you." We had the FBI, the CDC, the Florida Department of Health. They set us down in a hotel ballroom in Delray Beach, Florida. And they were like, "We honestly don't know what's going to happen to you, right? There's a history of an anthrax outbreak in Russia many years ago, and we know that spores stay dormant for so long, so we're going to give you medication." So long story to explain how I ended up getting into like education the first time. So I was like, wow, this is like I'm shook from this experience. Like what's a safe place for me to go to work now? And I ended up reaching out to the school that I graduated from. And I asked them if they had a role, and they said, yeah, we have a role for you, but it's an hour and a half each way from your house. And I was like, I'm in, I'll take it. Right. So I ended up teaching day and night classes an hour and a half from home. So I couldn't actually drive home in between. So in that lull time, what I did is I started to learn about these emerging disciplines, this interaction design, information architecture, content strategy. And I started to teach myself these things and start to learn it and then start to incorporate it in my courses, in my lessons. And that was like my first true introduction into the different disciplines of UX, and teaching those to myself and to my students. At some point, I was like, I've got to go out and apply these. So I did. And then I ended up going back to school and getting a master's so that I had foundational knowledge in it. But that to me is like one of the most defining moments of turning something that didn't work out, that like was terrible, into something that's kind of shaped my career. Another great time was really starting to solve complex problems and early natural language processing and AI in healthcare. When I was at 3M, we started to look at how you can find excess expenditures or improper quality of care in hospitals and automate coding and billing and diagnoses. So that was like early taste of emerging tech that was really exciting to me, and seeing the impact of design as like a force of good to actually focus on things like quality of care, medical devices. And then, like anyone else, there's been ups and downs, right? There's been great experiences and there's ones that you just take away and you learn from, but it's about how you gather what you've learned and figure out how to apply it. And then there are times where you're like, I've got this framework, I've got this playbook, and then you learn you just have to throw it out the window. So really, I think going through all of these different experiences have taught me to be more adaptable and more like go with the flow from time to time. You've got to have some flexibility in your process, especially as you're leading other designers.
And that's fantastic. Thank you for that. And is that kind of that marriage of tech and design, is that something that excites you, that kind of keeps you motivated as well, and obviously changes the design market so quickly as well?
It is, and it does. If you would have asked me a couple of years ago, like what gets me up and gets me going about what I do, and it's always like the impact that we have on people, right? How do we help people achieve goals and solve problems and bring them into the process and inspire each other to do better? But I think I get really excited when we talk about how we can marry that emerging technology to things. So people, when things are very early, people are a little scared, a little hesitant, nervous about it. But how do you actually go in to start to understand it and unpack it and understand the capabilities that it has? And we've seen over the years, right? There are times that we jump too fast into technology without understanding the harm that it can cause. And we see that every day. Like there are just things that have happened the way from early days of like pretty much any technology that started can be used for good or bad. And now as we look at like algorithmic bias and just inequalities as a result of algorithms and just jumping too fast into technology, now we've got this AI in front of us, right? And there are some people that embrace it, and there are others that are like, this is going to take my job, and they get nervous from it. And I think I get to really engage with AI a lot on a daily basis now. And as I see what it's capable of and as it continues to evolve and get smarter, it's not that scary, right? There are things that it does that make my life easier. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, if someone sends me a really long message, I can have it like summarize that for me. There are ways that it can become a knowledge base. There are ways that it can solve problems for our customers. But I don't and it could create interfaces, but I don't see it replacing designers. It's doing things that like I don't know that designers have been doing anyway. We've been trying to generate some of these early
Yeah.
concepts and early things pretty easily.
I think AI is definitely going to come up a bit later in this talk anyway. So let's hold on that one.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think there's going to
Okay.
be some questions there, and I think everyone's interested in your thoughts around that. Um, a question to you again, talking about design leadership, and I know there's people, here like listening now, or will watch the video and kind of go back on it, aspiring design leaders or younger design leaders. What advice would you give a a fledgling Andy Vitale who was just starting out in design leadership? Hindsight's a great thing. Are there a few lessons you may have learned that you'd love to be able to tell yourself now?
I think the first thing is patience, right? I know we all move this world, this industry moves really fast. But maybe earlier in my career, I can remember times 10 years ago where someone would say something like, "Hey, where are you on that project?" Or, "Hey, I really want this thing." And being ambitious, I'm like, I'm all over it. I'm in. And then 6 months go by and I realized it didn't even move that much. So I've got some designers that are mid-level career, younger in their careers, and they're often like on hyper alert, like jumping, like, "Oh, this is, I've got to drop everything and do this now." And I see that with early leaders too. And I just I kind of laugh and say, look, that's still going to be here tomorrow. That's still going to be here in 2 months from now, right? How far we move it is important. But ultimately, like, there are going to be things that come up that you just wait it out. Just don't go both feet all the way in all the time, because have that patience. You're going to see things are going to change every day. There's going to be a different requirement, a different angle, a different pivot that we have to make. So like, just enjoy the journey. That's the first thing.
Love that.
The second thing is really start to understand like people and what motivates people, because what motivates you might be different than what motivates me, right? If I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, which I do, and we've got an offshore team, like, throw me on the call with them because I'm already up, instead of someone else that maybe has young children and doesn't sleep all well throughout the night, right? Start to understand what drives people. If someone is in love with a certain technology, that's their passion or a solution, like, put them on that. Let them go through and experience that and feel that passion and see that through. So it really is identifying those things that make people tick and really want them to be successful and help them. Um, I'll do a third. So I think the third thing is have this desire to really like coach, right? I think this is one piece of advice that this industry needs now more than ever, especially if you're a leader, right? There are some uncertain times, and people are nervous and people are worried, and there's a lot of people looking for work. When I broke into this industry, I had people that sat alongside me that took the time to say, "Hey, you know what? That's not right. Why don't you try this? Let me show you this." Right? I don't think we're doing that. I think we're all a little bit too busy. I get messages on LinkedIn all the time, as I'm sure everyone does, especially you. But at first, I noticed, like, here's a designer that maybe has 2 years of experience. They're reaching out to me because I posted a role I'm not even the hiring manager for, and they're like pushing me to, like, "I want to show you my portfolio. Like, I want 30 minutes of your time." And at first I'm like, wait, I would have never contacted like chief design officer, head of design, and like demanded time with them. But then I realized, like, they're scared. They really need advice. Like, don't take the approach that they took as like the intent that they had. They're really just looking for guidance and advice. So how do you take that moment to reply to every single person? How do you actually have that conversation with them, look at their work and be honest with them, and not say, "Oh yeah, this is great, you should talk to someone else." No, literally say, like, "This is what I see that can be improved here." Like, take the time to show that you care. If you care enough about this industry and the living that you've made off of it, you've got to care enough to support that next generation of people. And early in my career, I would have ghosted them. I would have not replied to those LinkedIn messages. And now I realize, like, I've got to. It's my job.
I love that. Three great points there. Just to recap, patience. Maybe don't try and move that needle too quick. Empathy, which is a word we use a lot in design, but it's an important one. But coaching because you care, and probably getting that satisfaction from that as well. It's fantastic.
Right.
Thank you. And Andy, you've in the past few years, you've built some pretty big design teams and ecosystems, particularly like Truist and Rocket. What do you feel are the keys to growing a successful design team ecosystem and optimizing that team?
Love that. It's so different in so many places. So I think first it's about the culture. It's about the culture that the design team brings. It's a culture of experimentation, a culture of curiosity, right? How do you find that right person in the organization that is bought into that and really starts to like understand that and see that, and how do you help guide that vision? Along the way, you start to uncover opportunities to involve design in solving some problems. And that may introduce new flavors of design, like service design or conversational design, that the organization isn't used to. Now, this isn't a foolproof plan, because there are times that organizational leadership changes. And one of the things, and I'll go back to that, but one of the things I truly believe in is the trajectory of design has to meet the trajectory of the organization perfectly, or at some point something's got to give. It's the design leadership, it's organizational leadership. Like it's got to align. So there's got to be that synergy. But the way I look at it is, you've really just got to start by showing value, building momentum. In some of the earliest, smallest teams I've had, it's like, give us the pilot project that we can prove out our value. Let us show the results. And once the organization starts to see those results, they're like, you know what? I want that here, and I want that there. I want that as many places as I can. And it's like, I've got a team. It doesn't matter how many. You're asking me to do 8, 9, 10 more things. Like, we're going to need another person or two. We just can't hold that bandwidth and be successful, because once you start to work on too many things, the quality of work suffers immediately. And if we're really focused on like quality and improving quality, we've got to show up with that rigor and that quality. Now, again, it's about meeting the organization and everyone in it where they are. So how do you align with the right people on the right problems, making sure that you're showing up and speaking the right language, and everything that you're doing is adding value? Because when you're under the microscope, all it takes is one or two like misses, and then the credibility of the entire organization goes away.
It kind of leads on to something I was going to ask you later, I guess. It's that marriage of design and how design and how we position design, particularly in the big organizations or going to, corporations going through digital transformation, how you elevate design to work with tech and product, right? And I think I'll ask you in a little while, about your current role now as you're at the C-suite, how that kind of interaction comes. But just going back a little bit, we can't deny this has been a tougher year for design.
Right.
It's not all fun and games, as a leader. It must be very difficult to have to lay off staff and let people go that maybe you didn't bring in, you did bring in. From going through that, how did you navigate, and how would you suggest navigating those waters, which are obviously very tricky ones?
Yeah. So I was actually involved in some of that earlier this year. The So it's tough, right? It's tough to see anything that you've built, anyone that you've hired. It doesn't matter if it's a layoff or performance, right? Having to let somebody go. But unfortunately, this year for our industry, we've seen lots of layoffs at a lot of companies. And if it hasn't happened to your organization or people this is probably something that you should think about, right? The first thing is to be prepared for everything, right? How do you start to understand all of the possibilities that could happen? How do you start to maybe scenario map some worst case scenarios and figure out how to communicate things like that? What does a communications plan look like? How would you even handle it? Like what happens there? Um, and then if that moment comes, right, there's usually something that you've got to say. There's talking points, there's ways to communicate. You've got to handle that. These are people at the end of the day, right? So you've got to handle it as empathetically in the same way you'd want it to be handled for you. So there may be lots of questions, lots of the same question from many people after each other, because people have a question in their mind and they want to ask it, but they're not listening in a moment like that of like, oh, did someone else ask that same question that I have? So it's okay to get asked the same question multiple times. Um, Really, it's about connecting with people, same as it is as a leader, right? It's about how you connect with people as people, that one-on-one relationship that you have. There are times where you get to say things out loud as part of a group, and there are other times where you have those one-on-one conversations. What you need to do is to make sure that they're authentic and that you're not saying different things to different people. And the way that you communicate, and as a leader, this is something that like I work on every day, and I know that I have opportunities to improve, but how clearly can you communicate? Right now that I'm in a smaller organization than I was in, I'll tell you, and we'll come back around. There are times where I used to, with a large organization, I can say something relatively broad and like four or five people already are filling in what I meant. Like, how do we get from like, he's at point Z, here's A, B, C, D, here's what they mean. Now that I don't have that same structure, I'm like, wow, what I just said was kind of broad. Like, how do I actually follow this through and communicate clearly? So I try to catch myself and ask, like, did you understand what I said? Did this make sense? Like, was I too vague? Like, how do I continually get feedback so that I'm communicating clearly? And back to where we were going, like, because if you're prepared for everything and you have a communications plan and a style and way to communicate that leaves nothing uncertain, everything is clear, then you're going to be more successful at handling situations like that. But I'm starting to see light, right? I'm starting to see opportunities present themselves. But every day it's like, oh, 15 more jobs, but another company had layoffs, right? So how do we start to, like, at some point, this will pass. Everything is cyclical. When I first broke in, um, it was very similar to this. It was hard to find work. There were a lot more people looking for work than there were work. Some people, they changed careers. It's really hard. Like, now is the time that, like I said earlier, we've got to like give back and coach and help people grow, because at some point, like, this may not be what's right for everybody. So how do we help them understand that early on so that they're not spending 5 more years of their career like this trying to find a job?
Thank you for that. Some lovely points there. And as you mentioned, we're in a quite a good position in terms of being a talent recruitment agency, that we speak to many candidates every day and lots of clients. And it feels like there's a sense of optimism going into 24, which hopefully we'll see through. And on that point, in your new role, in your chief design officer, at Constant Contact, what's it like working now at the C-suite, and maybe having a bigger voice at the table for design and representing design at that level? Because as we know, many organizations, design isn't at C-suite, and that's a challenge. So what's it like being there now? If you can give us some of that experience.
Yeah, it's really interesting because the truth is, like, it's always good. Like, you can always get a feeling for what you think it's like, but it's never what you think it is until you're there. So I had the privilege of working at 3M under a chief design officer, and seeing how design was treated was really interesting, right? There were still challenges. There's still like areas that have more buy-in for design than others, but like the maturity of a practice, having been able to see that. And then in other roles, I've been the highest design person, but not at that actual table, right? Always like connected to the table, at the kids part of the table, right? Like, how are you actually like sitting down and helping move a business? And I will say there's a duty and a credibility that comes with it. So the first is the credibility, right? You automatically walk in as a peer to people, right? They're still potentially skeptical to something that you may offer, or what design is, or the value of design. They may not get it. But at the end of the day, in my current situation, everyone has been so welcoming from day one, right? My first conversation with our CEO was like, look, we can be a product company, we can be a tech company. I want us to be a user experience company, right? I want us to provide great experiences to people. When I met the CTO, he's like, we've been waiting for you to get here. Like, let's dig in. Like, how do we take things forward? Chief product officer has been great. I have a weekly meeting with our chief product officer, chief executive officer, chief revenue officer, chief strategy officer, chief product officer, chief technology officer. I may have duplicated a few, but anyway, we talk. It's a design steering committee, and we actually talk about like what we're working on with design, what our priorities are. And this is an opportunity for me at the same time to start to educate them on things they may have already known about us but haven't seen in a while. So aside from like, here's what we're working on, here's some inspiration, here's what's next, like, all about these things, let me take a few minutes and walk you through our front door through one of our use cases and see like where things may be a little bit wonky, where things may have more opportunity for us to focus on. those are moments that are really eye-opening and collectively important for us to see and to talk about and understand, and understand trade-offs. And like it's just a deeper level of conversation. And while I don't even know that it's deeper. It's just like it's like I said, it's a little bit more of the credibility with these folks. So it's not always like, I've got to prove myself. Let me show you what we could do. Let me show you what we could do. Let me justify why I should be there. It's like, you're here now, just move, right? Like, do,
Like it.
like, we brought you in for a reason. Just go. And I love that.
Great, great. There's probably a few people nodding their head thinking that sounds very nice to go in at that level and be able to be impart straight away. And we were saying just now about the optimism going into next year, and hopefully there's a lot of design leaders that I know that are going to be getting great new roles. Any advice on going in and not necessarily growing a design team, but adopting one? How do you go in and kind of bring your design and your leadership influence into that? How do you buy the hearts and minds? Any advice around that?
Yeah, so 57 days into my new role, um, what I'm really trying to do is still spend time listening and learning and understanding things that affect the team, like what the prioritization process is, how work actually happens, what the team's bandwidth looks like, what they're working on, um, organizationally. Do is the way that we're structured, does that make sense, right? What are the foundational elements to allow this company to unlock this function to provide value like it never has before? But that's the easy part, right? So the harder part is building the relationships in the busy day to day of all the meetings. How do you take the time to actually like meet with people? And there's not enough time. There's never enough time to spend time with people. There's always like, it's a quick Slack message, and sometimes it comes off as short. Especially like, I communicate on Slack of like, I got a thought, I'm putting it out, right? It may not have that empathy that is behind my intent. So how do you make those moments and start to show value? Like, how are you helping the team with what they're doing? How are you building that credibility with them, that they see you not as an outsider that's coming in to change the way they work, but someone that's really there to like make their life a little bit easier, help them do their best work, and really like unlock things that help them deliver in a way that they never have before. And that's just like, I'm going to get a lot of things right, and I'm going to get a lot of things wrong. I hope that I get more things right than wrong in the beginning, but as we get in it together, like, I've got their back. I will amplify their work, and I won't let them fail. I will give them opportunities to learn and make mistakes and help coach through that, but I'm not going to let them fall. And it's different because it's kind of easier when you build your own team, right? You know kind of what you need and what you have and what that looks like. And here you bring in, you meet people that are on the team, and you're like, wow, like these are fantastic people. Like, you always go in with the like, I don't know what I'm going to get into, and then you're always pleasantly surprised, right? I think in our own minds we always think like, what do I do with what I have? But it's like, people are the people I've been meeting every day, the people on my team. I've been so happy to get to know them. I've been so happy to like see them work. And I'm going to be so much happier when I feel like I'm adding more value for them.
That's great.
But
Obviously, if you hire someone yourself, you do the interviewing, you vouch for them, and they go in and they kind of almost feel like they owe you in some sense, which they don't. They owe themselves to just do a great job. But when you go into a new role, there's got to be a little bit of trepidation from that team. Is he going to be impressed by me, etc. So it can't be easy. And I guess in the remote world we're working as well, is it a lot of one-on-ones? Because obviously doing the group stuff is a bit tougher, isn't it? If you're not in person all the time when you first go into a new role.
it's so I did a first round of one-on-ones. I'm still meeting people every day in the organization. So I've had something like 85 one-on-ones with different people throughout the company, aside from all the group meetings. So I'm just getting ready for like deep second round one-on-ones. But what I'm doing is communicating back along the way. So like, hey team, we're going to fill out a survey, right? By the way, like, that helps me learn. A couple of weeks later, I'm like, here's some of the things that I'm seeing and hearing. Here's some of the things I'm amplifying. Let me share that. Did I get it right? So how do you take advantage of the group settings to then like trigger specialized like one-on-one conversations. Like, so what I want to do is say the thing that resonates with someone that then pings me on Slack that we then set up a conversation with, because it's hard to like, you don't want to get in a cycle of like making the rounds, because sometimes it's just you don't always get to everyone as often as you would like to. So what I encourage is that people tag me in their Figma files, like tag me in anything, like reach out to me on Slack. If there's something on your mind, like let's talk about it. I will make the time to do that, because I know there's that trepidation like you described, but there's also trepidation from the leader of like, hey, like I'm walking in with what I think is perceived credibility with this team. Is it real? Am I proving myself on a daily basis that they're bought into me and see me in the role that I'm in? So that trepidation or even imposter syndrome works both ways.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you for that. Look, we had some great information and knowledge sharing there, about your past and the lessons you learned and where we're going. I think as we mentioned, we're looking forward with a little bit of trepidation to 24, but we'd love to hear a little bit about your top tips for 24. Where do you see, design moving? What do you see as could be the major changes? What are things we should be watching out for and the like?
Yeah, it's funny, as I thought about like some of these tips for 24, we touched on a lot of them just through natural conversation. So the first thing is always like the things we've talked about, the hardships that an organization or team could face. Like it really is about being prepared for anything and everything to happen, right? How do you set things in place that just plan for how you'll handle them, right? What is the baseline? How do you do some scenario mapping? What does that look like? Another thing for leaders to do is really build that personal advisory board, right? I think that a lot of times we're so busy that the thing that we neglect most is our own personal like growth and networking and development. Like it's great to have a network and be like, oh, I can ping this person or text them once a year and like it's cordial and like they'll help me, I'll help them. But how do you really build this support system of people that will give you honest guidance and feedback throughout the year and really be that like sounding board for you when you need to be, right? Work on that network, build those people, build the people that won't tell you what you want to hear, build the people that are going to tell you what you have to hear. Because there are times where like you need that perspective, because they're looking at something that you've been deep in and don't really see all the different variables. So it is important to build that. Again, about that communication, like really start to think what it means to communicate almost anything. What is the strategy? What is the plan? We talked about AI, right? It's here to stay. How do we get in front of it? How do we be comfortable with it? How do we make sure that we know how to use it so it doesn't cause harm? Another thing, as companies are starting to look for efficiencies and cost savings, right? How do we learn how to do more with less? How do we learn how to make things that are reusable, right? We often hear reusable, we think, all right, sustainability. Sustainability is like materials, or like we can talk about reusability in terms of a design system, right? But how do we even go beyond that? How do we work on features, components that are reusable, that can be picked up and used in different places for different ways? Like, how do we really show that we understand financial implications and be able to speak to those? The other thing that's super important is really understand metrics. Like make sure that you're in the conversation where it's determined how we're going to measure what success looks like. Because yeah, there are some design metrics, yeah, there are some business metrics, but like they have to work hand in hand. And at the end of the day, in most businesses, conversion is the number one metric, right? If people don't like a product, it's not going to matter what the NPS score is if they're not using it, or like if it's not making money. It's not going to, I promise you, if something is not successful, if people aren't using it, the NPS score is not going to be high, right? There's no instance where like people love a thing, but they refuse to use it. So I think those are the key things. I think from a design perspective for your teams, I think we need to think about how to leverage beyond AI. How do we leverage voice? How do we start to leverage different channels and bring together a seamless experience? Maybe something starts conversationally on your phone or in your car, and then it moves to like your laptop or your iPad, depending on where you are. how do you start to understand personalized experiences and contextual how they intend to be used and bring that together? And AI can help with that. The probably one of the other things, I guess, no, that as I think about what else I would think about for 2024, I think we're seeing a lot of things happen right now with tools, right? Tools often change. There's so many tools popping up every day. You know, yesterday Adobe and Figma announced that they're not going to move forward with the acquisition. And I think that that adds a little bit of excitement to the market, right? Whatever side of the Adobe Figma side you were on, right? Are you for it or against it? Now that it's not happening, like what's going to happen? Is Adobe going to lean back in on XD? Is Figma going to leverage some of the things? Are they going to work together? Like, how do you stay in front of that? And these are things that your teams are going to be a little bit like uncertain about too. Like every little piece of uncertainty just adds a little bit on top of the team. So how do you at least stay current in those trends to be able to have and host those conversations so that the team can actually get what's on their mind, like out of their mind, and start talking about it and have healthy dialogue about it. And then finally, I would say that your job as a leader is to create a safe space. And what a safe space is not a place to like just let things sit, right? A safe space is a space where people are willing to challenge you and each other. It's okay to have this healthy challenging and dialogue and debate. That's good, right? We all want positive outcomes, even if it's our cross-functional partners, even if it's legal, even if it's product technology, right? We all want what's best for the experience. How do we create that environment where we can kick the tires and just push each other and challenge each other so that what we're putting out not only solves the problem for the people, but that in turn, by creating value for the customer, it creates the value and revenue for the business. So how do we start to create those spaces and really open that challenge and have that like challenging collaboration?
Thanks, Andy. I think you've made some really good points there that all kind of revolve around how, you know, leaders within design can elevate design, you know, within an organization to really show the value of it as well. But I think there's some good pointers there from what you said. And what I'd love to do now is open up for any questions to Andy. I'm sure he's got you thinking about a few things. So feel free to jump in and fire away with any questions you may have. Andy will be keen to answer. Who's the least shy? Who's going to start us off? Lawrence, you putting your hand up, or you? Yep, great stuff.
Yeah, thanks so much. Really love again hearing about your journey and about you know, just the honest conversation. Andy and Andrew, thanks so much for Andy, thanks for bringing it to us. A question for you, Andy, is around strategy. And again, as you're elevated in the organization, it seems to me that, you know, there's probably a greater responsibility that you're feeling for influencing, setting, being part of setting that strategy. And I think when we think about that sort of conversion metric, there's obviously kind of this interesting tension between the short-term revenue opportunity and the long-term loyalty and engagement opportunity. And I'm wondering how you're trying to shape that dialogue, or what your early thoughts are in your new role.
Yeah, love that question. So in my new role, what I'm trying to do is first get up to speed on all the different strategies that they have in place and find opportunities to like inject different thinking. Like, is there something that I'm seeing that I'm like, wow, I can throw something a little bit crazy out there. Maybe it's bigger thinking, maybe it's not, maybe it's wrong, and that's okay. How do I start to like just push in that way? Like, imagine the art of the possible, but even like 10x that. So like look at what they're looking at and say that's cool, but what if we didn't have an interface at all? Or what if we didn't, like what does it look like? What could it be? You know, sometimes it gets crazy looks and other times it inspires, like, yeah, what if we could do this? That's first, is how do I like get caught up on everything? I feel like I'm in a good place and I understand like the key things and I'm starting to inject like thoughts and ideas. Beyond that, then, is how do we break down that larger strategy into like different work streams? And from there, it's like, for me, I'm starting to now push on my leaders and say, hey, like in this space, like I expect you to drive the strategy for this thing. I expect you to work with product and tech and really like push out how far you can, like take what the team's doing and just try to push even further. And then I go to the team and say, hey, I know what you're thinking here. I know what they're asking. Like, how do you take that and push that even further? So for me, it's like having conversations whenever I have an idea, publicly or with a couple of people, and saying, hey, you know what, I'm thinking about this now. Like, what if we did this? What if we blew up our entire mobile experience and rebuilt this thing and like started to launch this way? What if we ended up like not focusing on, you know, the product that we're offering, but what if we like automated all of these things? Like, what does this look like? And you know, for me, it's just, I'm always, I think design is that vehicle to not only like challenge the status quo, but also to create the things that and when I say things, I don't want to put outputs over outcomes, but how do we leverage the artifacts that we can create in our toolbox for like creating vision, for inspiring people? What can we build that's aspirational, that get people really excited about it? And that's when we get the organization to shift. That's when the strategy starts to evolve. There are times that our strategy is like just hey, this is working, don't touch it, right? That might also be a strategy, like don't push here. So it's how do you blend the like what we're really good at versus some of the things that we also have to do and we can be also good at. So it's how do you catch up? How do you move fast? How do you fly the plane while you're, how do you build the plane while you're flying it? It's all the things that as leaders, like, is there areas of ambiguity that we thrive in.
Thanks, Lawrence. Great question. Thanks for the answer there, Andy. We've got time for a couple more questions. If anyone else has anything else they'd like to ask Andy, feel free to just jump in or put your hand up and jump in. Marielle, please go ahead. Or was that a clap rather than a hand up?
That's a clap.
That's a clap. Okay.
Clap, sorry.
Anyone else would like to ask Andy any questions?
Yes, me. Hey.
Thanks, Laura.
Hi, Andy. Hey.
Hello.
Hey, Andy. You were talking about how, being new in your role, you have a little bit of imposter syndrome sometimes as the new leader. And I was wondering if you could suggest any tips how to handle that and overcome it when you're a new leader. Thank you.
I love that question. So, you know, so for me, my imposter syndrome is my inner critic. And my inner critic is the loudest voice. And this is me as a person. Like, anytime I interact with someone, like, don't ever tell me what I'm doing good. Like, just tell me what I suck at. Tell me where I could get better. Like, that's just me. Because part of me is like, I kind of know what's good, but also I start to feel like, hey, they told me that was good, but I know it could be better. So is that really authentic feedback that they're giving me, or are they just telling me nice things? So like, that is how I think on a daily basis. So for me, it's like, part of what I do is try not to replay conversations in my head before they happen, and go through like, oh, I'm going to have this conversation and I'm going to say this, and this person's going to then say that, and then I'm going to reply to that and think about it for 2 days. I'm starting to like just go with it. Other things that I try to do is I try to have I try to say things confidently in a way that I truly believe, and then try not to like, there's always that like, you replay that moment of the conversation. I said that thing that was awkward, it got quiet after I said that, like, oh no, like what's going to happen next, right? How do you just shut that down and say, I'm not looking behind me, I'm on to the next thing. Like, what's the next thing in front of me? And sometimes the next thing in front of you in those moments also gets overwhelming, where you're like, wait, I just started 5 things at once. Like, I just have to sit down and do one of these things right, but I'm trying to do them all at once. So that's when I like take another second and I just say, look, stop, right? You make a list, go one by one through that list, and like, just get it done. And those are things that have helped me, of like, just like, I need that hard stop and reset, even if it's 10 seconds, and then move forward. just so, because I know like it's something I constantly work on. Like I'll probably analyze everything that I've said today, like, oh, what, but I'm going to try not to.
Okay, thanks a lot. You're speaking with the ADD person inside me as well.
Thank you for that, Laura.
There's a great book.
Thank
Yeah, Laura, there's a great book by Denise Jacobs called Banish Your Inner Critic that I would also recommend.
Thank you. I will look it up. And thanks, Andy, for bringing this awesome discussion to us.
Absolute pleasure. Lacey, you have a question for Andy?
Hi. Yes, I do.
Great,
You
thank
talk
you.
about building your personal advisory board. And I was curious, who is on your personal advisory board and what advice do you give to us of how to structure our own personal advisory boards to make sure that we're balancing our own blind spots and whether in both internal and externally?
So this is a great question. So my personal advisory board is a mix of people that I am different versions of myself with, right? There are some people that I'm like just can goof around with and be honestly like open and myself and like not worry if I say something stupid. And for that, I've got a couple of people that I used to work with that I have conversations. And a lot of these conversations I have with that group happen through like either a group text or like a weird like TikTok message, right? It's literally like how are they keeping me sane throughout like moments in time? And also like I can have vulnerable conversations in that moment. Then there are people that I've worked for in the past that have been really like inspirational to me, that have done things that I've done that I can call up and say, hey, I'm about to do this. Like this is a thought. What do you think? Does this make sense? And what's funny there is some of the people on my advisory board, I've become on their advisory board because it's like just as our careers have progressed and now we're like at the same level or whatever, like we just have different conversations. Some of the people are people that I think have a different like eye for design than I do, a different aesthetic, right? Who's some of the most talented designers I've ever worked with, regardless of their level, and say, hey, like what's hot? What's a trend right now? What should I be paying attention to? Where are you getting inspiration? So I've built an advisory board of people that like offer different voices to me at different times when I need it. So I'm not throwing names out. I don't want to out anybody for being on my advisory board, but there are folks that I see very rarely, a couple of times a year, that when I'm together with them, Andy and Kimberly saw me in New York in like December. I saw Aaron Ron Irizarry, right? Like when him and I get together, it's like magic for those day or two. And then we just don't talk for like till the next time we see each other. It's like we talked every minute of the day. So there are just like people that bring out different things in you. And now like if I have a question or look for him for advice. So really Lisa, who I do my podcast with, has a wealth of like, I love to share like what's going on in my like professional life with her for her perspective. Having done the things that she's done, like she's always got great advice. So how do you find those people that just challenge the way that you think, not just sit there and like agree with you and say, uh-huh, that's right. Yep, that's not a good situation for you. You should move on to this. Like you don't want that. You want people that are offering you like solutions and also people that are like helping you analyze what you're trying to do.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for that, Andy. How to meet those people is often a question as well, right? Obviously, there's some you've worked with or you're gonna meet, but there's lots of great design events that Andy and speaks at, and Lawrence comes to, and you get to meet a lot of your peers that way. And even us, our little future design forum, lots of design leaders in there. So any of you feel free to reach out to us. Make sure we connect you into that forum. There's always a good chance for meetups. It's a great thing because you meet peers, you make friends, you find out you've all got some of the same challenges and often some of the same solutions as well. So we're here to help support bringing people together as well. So that's a great question, and thanks for the answer there, Andy. Right, we're kind of coming towards the end, but we've got time for one more question. If anyone's got one they'd like to pop in, so put your hand up if you have. Kevin, please go ahead. Thank you.
Hey, Andy, good seeing you.
Yeah, you too, Kevin.
Hey, I was thinking of a question here. You do so much in the public sphere, and you share so much about your career journey and as what you've learned. And I'm curious, from a leadership perspective, how do you think about the balance between the internal communication and relationship building versus the public side of things?
Yeah, I love that question. And Kevin's someone I've known for many years. Worked with him at 3M, got to see him go off and do run a design part of the organization internationally is so cool. And then got to reconnect with him in Detroit not too long ago. I From an outside perspective, especially in some companies I've been in, it makes it look like there's a lot of like focus on me externally. Like I spend so much time external. I would say that this year I've probably spoken at the least amount of external things that I've done in 5 or 6 years. I just like to share what I know with people, and the only way I know to do that is through like conversation. I'm 1,000,000% focused on my internal relationships right now, especially being new in the company, and how do we start to leverage those relationships to help push the value and the I don't want to call it an agenda, but push the awareness and the understanding of design in our organization. But along the way, I'm going to learn things and make mistakes and find things that worked for me. And I think that personally, like my duty to the rest of our industry is to take that and share it with people externally. Because at the end of the day, the relationships that I have internally are what make me like do what I do, help my team succeed, help me be successful. And then the relationships I have externally also kind of give me value in a way that like I'm just trying to give back or match the value that I'm getting from the community by giving back what I can learn. But I would say like I'm 80% internal, 20% external. I just happen to have a very loud external voice right now. So it just seems like it's carrying further than it is.
Thanks for the question, Kevin. And thank you, Andy. And I think that leads us nicely on to giving a big round of applause and a massive thanks for Andy, who has such a focus on internal as well as external, for taking his time today to talk to us. It's very kind of him. Always engaging, always informative, and great to hear. And at the same time, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. I know it's lunchtime in the US at the moment and evening in the UK. So I appreciate you taking the time and take this opportunity to wish you all a very happy holidays. And, if you want to reach out to us, please do so. And hopefully we'll connect in the new year. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Andy.
Cheers so much. Bye-bye now.